You're listening to Art Affairs, episode 24. Today I'll be talking to J.A.W. Cooper. Alright, so my name's Michael Faith, and this is Art Affairs. If this is your first time listening, Art Affairs is meant to give you a look at and into the new contemporary art community, featuring conversations with artists, gallerists, curators, shining a spotlight on the human side of the wonderful work they do. You can dig through previous episodes, complete with show notes at artaffairs.podcast.com, and you can check out new episodes on all your favorite podcast platforms. Of course, if you like what I'm doing here, be sure to subscribe. And you can always connect with the show on Instagram and Facebook at Art Affairs Podcast. All right, so today's guest is artist J.A.W. Cooper. I'm really excited to have Cooper on the show. She's someone I've followed for a while now, and I absolutely love the, rich folklore, fairy tale-esque style her work tends to have. But her personal work isn't the only part of her story. Like a few of the other guests I've had on in the past, there's a whole other side to her career, doing freelance commercial illustration. We talk about the role commercial work has had and continues to have in her life on the show, as well as the recent years she took off from making art, her upcoming solo show at Gallery Nucleus, and a whole lot more. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with J.A.W. Cooper. Cooper, welcome to the show. I'm really stoked to have you on.
I'm really happy to be here.
All right, so you have a really interesting background, so I wanted to dive into that a little bit. You were born in England to a South African mother and an American father, which are very different parts of the world. So how did they meet and come together in England, where they had you?
So they actually met here in California. My father was a professor at UCSB, a freshwater ecologist, and my mother was actually his grad student.
Oh, wow.
But they're like 2 years apart in age. So he was really young. And they're both freshwater ecologists, which is what brought my mom. So she's South African born, but she grew up in England and then came over here for grad school. So they met just because they're both freshwater ecologists. And then the reason I was born in England is they just happened to be back there when I was born. And half my family is back over there. Like my mom's side of the family is either there or I have an uncle in South Africa.
Interesting. So as freshwater ecologists, what was the nature of the work that they were doing?
Let's see. They specialize in invertebrates. So it seems so specific, but they are freshwater insect scientists. Okay. And they do research on stream ecology. We lived in Kenya for a while because they do professor exchanges, and they also do research. So they'll do research studies and stuff. And that kind of took us around the world. Yeah,
because you were like living in Kenya, Sweden, yeah. Ireland. How often did you guys move?
Let's see. It was kind of concentrated into there were two main times. So Kenya, that was when I was before, I would have been 3 to 6 or 2 to 5 or something. So that was 2 years. And then later, when I was around 5th grade, we went for a year and did Sweden, Ireland, and kind of traveled around Europe. So they were mostly those two big chunks, and it's called part of it is sabbatical, which is where professors get this time off, and part of it was professor exchanges in Kenya. My father was running the abroad program for the universities in Kenya. So exchanging students between their universities and around the world.
Interesting. So were they doing field research while you guys were traveling?
Yes, and not always. So sometimes in there it was just kind of vacation, like extended vacation, or maybe he would teach at a university. But in Kenya and some of the other places, there was also research going on.
Okay, and did you ever get a chance to spend enough time in one place to really get to know its culture, language, stuff like that?
I only speak English, unfortunately. I just know little phrases in Swedish and Swahili, but which are almost useless. But definitely, like the culture in Kenya, those were my earliest memories, and so I think I kind of like came online in Kenya, and then Sweden and Ireland. We went to school in Ireland for a little while, like in a rural country school. So those were the three I'd say that we spent enough time in that it felt like, you fall in love with the place at least.
Was it difficult traveling so much? Just, having that kind of instability, or did you like the constant change?
I loved it. I thrived. I think I don't have a problem saying goodbye to friends and then making new friends, not in like a cold way, just it doesn't rip me apart. I didn't mind the instability. And I kind of like every time you move, you get to reinvent yourself, especially as a little kid. I think that's kind of cool. And then I have a little sister who's just a year and a half younger. So it's not like I was lonely. We always had each other. On the flip side of that, I think just personality wise, my sister really struggled. She craves stability, where I think, I just didn't have the same issues with that.
Interesting. So of all the places that you live, do you have a favorite? Like, where are your fondest memories?
Oh, I'm not sure. That's a hard one, but I think Sweden is the one that comes to mind, because I remember the time I was there, just like, this was a long time ago, but we were living in Lund, and there wasn't a grocery store. So there was like the cheese shop for your cheese, and there was the bakery for your bread, and so on. And it just felt very like a really beautiful, kind of simple, pared down way of living. All the streets were cobbled stone. I don't know if it's still this way, but no one drove. Everyone's on bikes or walking. And
very like old world, it seems like.
Yeah, and kind of romantic, and I really enjoyed that. But obviously, I loved Kenya. Those are like my earliest childhood memories. And then Ireland was great because we got to go to school, and so we made friends and stuff like that.
And from what I've read, your interest in the arts actually came from, or was originally sparked by your mother, who drew scientific illustrations. What kind of subjects was she illustrating? Were these purely like for research, or did she treat them as art forms as well?
Let's see. Good question. She would do Audubon studies. So she'd do studies of, Audubon, like foxes and birds. So those were for fun, because she loved doing art. She loved painting and watercolor. But she also did scientific illustrations for publishing. And they're these so precise drawings of like insects, like down to every little hair on the mouth part, so you can identify it based on the drawing, and every hook, every little hair is there, and it's all perfect and really satisfying to look at. So she did both. She does art like for fun, and she also did it with a very scientific purpose in mind.
And so that ended up leading to you starting to draw. What was it about that attracted you so much?
Well, I remember we were I remember the day that I decided to draw, like to start doing it, because we were at SNARL, which is the Sierra Nevada Aquatic Research Laboratory. And it's this research lab up in the Sierra Nevada, obviously kind of up near Mammoth. But it's far away, and there were no other children there. It was just my sister and I, and then a bunch of grad students and people doing research on these kind of artificial streams. So it was a controlled environment. And I was kind of bored. And I think my mom had shown me her Audubon fox painting. And I thought, like, it looked like magic, right? Like it came out of nowhere, and I couldn't understand. But then in my head, I thought, if she can do it, then I can do it. And I know how they think in the scientific process of you do it over and over and test things. And I was like, I I bet if I just try this over and over and over with variations, I can learn how to do. It seemed like magic or like a party trick or something.
It's a very logical like approach. Kind of
very scientific. And I actually just yesterday found the drawing. It's I started with this grid of cats, and I was like trying just for memory to draw what a cat looked like. And I think I was like 6, and trying to change it each time to try to like use my memory of what a cat looks like to draw it. So there's just this old yellow piece of paper with like grids of just like a cat over and over and over.
That's amazing. That's a very kind of, like I said, scientific approach to that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So, when you first started, were you more or less imitating your mom and focusing more on scientific type illustrations, or were you basing it more on your imagination, more kind of what you do today?
Oh, definitely all animals. I don't think I really ever drew people, but it wasn't scientific. Like it wasn't that perfect, like where you could identify the thing from the drawing with every little hair. But definitely animals, and I'm sure that's because of what they did and what she was drawing.
Sure. And so at what point did you recognize that you wanted to become an artist as a career opposed to something more like scientific?
So yeah, growing up, if you draw a lot, people are always like kind of, I don't know, they're like, oh, good drawing, little girl. Like, oh, you're going to be an artist? And I'd be like, fuck no. Because it just seemed like really self-serving and kind of like a masturbatory career it was impractical. And so I really wanted to be a zoologist. And up until probably the junior year of high school or senior year of high school. So it was literally right as I was applying for colleges. I applied for a whole bunch that were in zoology. And then I was like, well, fuck it. Like, let me apply for a bunch that are also just in art. And I kind of thought that where I got in would determine what I would do. And I was like, well, if I get into zoology, I'll do art on the side for fun. If I get into art, I'll continue my interest in zoology on the side. So either way, I don't have to give it up. But I got in everywhere, which was great. But then it meant I actually had to grow a pair and make a decision. And I decided I just loved art too much to give it up. And also discovering the work of Terrell Whitlatch, who did the art of Star Wars, the concept art, was really formative because I believe she's like trained as a zoologist first, and that informs, how she's able to create these creatures and stuff. And I just thought, oh, well, there's a practical use for having an interest in both. Like you can have both in one career and have it be practical and not just like, I don't know, have it have a practical purpose and to make money and to live off of that.
It was a very literal fork in the road.
Yeah, it was a very literal fork in the road. Yeah.
And you were hoping that the application results would decide it for you.
kind of. Because I think I'd always really resisted the idea. I think I wanted to do art, but I'd really resisted the idea of ever choosing it. And so I was almost like daring the universe to make that decision for me. But it was good that I had to actually like admit that that's what I wanted to do in the end.
And were your parents supportive of your desire to pursue a career in arts?
They were, which is lucky because not everyone has that. And I'm sure part of that comes from the fact that they knew there were practical applications. I think so many families are resistant because they think it's, oh, you're going to be doomed to a life of struggling and starvation and the kind of classic starving artist trope. And I've always been pretty practical and responsible. So I think they were like, she'll find the practical, responsible way through this. And
awesome.
They were always, unbelievably supportive of that.
That's awesome. That's very cool. So you ended up going to college at Otis in LA. What led you there? What led you to Otis?
So I did tours of different colleges, and they had, it's funny, there's this teacher there called Gary Garoths, and he's the animal drawing teacher. And when I toured the campus, I saw they had a wall up of all the student work from his class, and it was all animal drawing. And I was like, that's what I want to do. That was it. So I was kind of sold. And ironically, obviously I had Gary Garoths later as a teacher, and he's like one of my most beloved teachers. I still go back and visit his class, but his wife was the International Baccalaureate grader for my high school. This is completely
wow.
random and unrelated. We didn't even figure it out till later. And because of her, he had already seen my sketchbooks when I went to a portfolio review where I just happened to get in line in his row. So when I came up with my portfolio, he was like, oh, I've seen this. My wife like has showed me your sketchbook. And because of this weird connection, I ended up getting a great scholarship to go there. And it was all because like, it's such a random series of coincidences with his wife and then also telling him later that it was that wall of his animal drawing class that kind of drew me there too. It's just very funny.
That's amazing. So your focus was illustration. What was it about illustration in particular that attracted you? Was it just all of those influences early on that sort of led you there?
Yeah. And I think going in, I really wanted to do scientific illustration, or I wanted to do concept art. And I wasn't comfortable doing digital work at the time. And so I really wanted to draw and paint. And I didn't realize till later it doesn't matter. Like, you have to get over your fear of the different tools, and they're all just tools. And because the concept art track is actually in their digital programs. And I probably would have done it if I wasn't in this weird mindset that digital was something I couldn't do. So I did illustration, and then, yeah.
Do you think that your time there was valuable, or just art school in general? Do you think that's a valuable experience for an artist?
I feel a lot of things. Like, I think I wouldn't be where I am if I hadn't had that experience and met those people. And it was a really immersive experience, and I took it extremely seriously. So for those 4 years, I just ate, slept, and made art, and I tried to do double the homework. Because I just thought, like, this is such an expensive experience that I can't afford to do anything less than get the absolute most out of every second, because it's just the most expensive thing I'll ever buy. But I also think that art school is a business. And if you can't, and I think if I were to be doing that now, I wouldn't have gone to art college probably. I would have done one of these series of sort of unaccredited programs. Ultimately, no amount of money you spend will make you good. And so it's all just what you put into it. And I think art college is just super expensive. Right now, Otis is having a lot of issues. I hated Otis. Like, I hated the entity that is Otis, but I loved my fellow students. I loved my professors. I hated the administration with like a burning visceral rage. And
I couldn't tell.
Yeah. And I think it's like kind of low-key a giant scam, but it's a scam that you can absolutely work back on itself and get what they're promising you're going to get out of it if you put in just a buttload of work. But it's a money-making entity, so they're going to keep, I think it's kind of criminal that they take so much money from people and they push them through these weird tracks. And and there's also a ton of, like, right now, issues with racism and sexism there that they're dealing with. So I don't know. I can't say it's the wrong decision or the right one. I think it worked out for me. And I was really lucky with scholarships and help from my parents and stuff. But you absolutely don't have to go. It's not like you won't become what you want to become if you can't afford to go. Absolutely. And it's not like if you go, you'll become what you want to become just because you paid for it. So I don't know, mixed emotions.
So after graduating, you ended up staying in LA. Was that because that had sort of become home for you? You know, for somebody who had for a long time not had a constant home, had that become like your home now?
Yes, yeah. And I hated LA, for the first 3 years, loathed it. And I remember the first time I visited LA, it was this crazy culture shock. Before I even went to college, my sister wanted to get fabric in the fabric district, which is actually ironically walking distance from where I live now. And it's a very, there's a big homeless population. And, I think it was just pure culture shock I was probably in high school, but I remember thinking, this is hell. Like, there's so much suffering. And I remember at one point, At one point, we were chased by an angry prostitute who kind of like a sex worker who ran out of her tent and kind of yelled at us and chased us. And then we turned a corner and there was like a burning dead dog in a dumpster. And I was just like,
wow.
This is actual hell.
Welcome to LA.
And I think that was just like such a weird, I've never had that happen since I've lived here. So I think it was just some weird coincidence. But after about 3 years of going to school here, I just started to love it. There's these interesting pockets, and I think I kind of like the grunge and the hustle and the bustle of the city. And it's such a supportive city for arts. There's so many pockets of support because a lot of it comes from the entertainment industry. It's like there's just a lot of money here for that, and then people can, like, artists can actually thrive here, not just survive. And because of that, there's lots of them, and then there's so many like kind of pockets of the animators and the storyboarders and the comic community and the gallery community, and I love that. It's just very supportive.
Sure, for sure. So, but living in downtown LA, that couldn't have been cheap, and especially right out of college.
Oh, super cheap.
Oh, really? Okay.
It was like almost all I could afford. It was $1,000 a month.
Okay. So that's the impression that LA gives, is that it's super expensive and it's hard to live there. But
oh, yes, it is super expensive. I'd say so. Downtown LA, it makes it, I think, sound swanky, but it was a ghost town, and it was basically the only people who came down here were either people who lived here or had business here. Back when I moved here, which would have been 10 years ago or so. The reason I originally moved here was downtown was because it was very cheap. It's mostly sort of old warehouses and old, like mine was, it was an old bank from the 1920s that had been converted into these kind of like lofts and stuff. And I just loved the industrial vibe of like concrete floors too. But back then it was a financial reason that I came here.
And what kind of work were you doing right out of college?
So for the first 2 years, I was doing almost exclusively gallery work and editorial. And I wasn't super successful with that, as far as like, it was such a struggle, just month to month, like just getting by and hustling for every next job and not knowing, absolutely perma broke. And oh man, it was really tough. And I know a lot of people made like incredible careers out of that kind of stuff, but it was, I found my work suffered too, especially the personal work, gallery work, because you felt like you really needed it to sell to pay your rent. So then you'd paint stuff that you thought would sell instead of stuff that was interesting to you. So it wasn't good for me.
So how did you maintain that schedule? Like early on, I mean, you were effectively working 2 full-time jobs with editorial and your personal work. Was that a difficult thing to maintain?
No, it felt like I wasn't working much at all. That was kind of part of the problem. Like the editorial stuff was so few and far between. I had a monthly column I would do for the LA Weekly, but everything else, book covers and stuff, that was like piecemeal work. And when you did get a job, it's not like you had it. It's not a recurring thing for me. Mm. And the gallery stuff, that was regular. But still, you can't rely on that for an income really, because it's, it all depends on one person loving your piece enough to buy it for quite a lot of money. So it felt like it was a lot of hustling and a lot of just doing personal work that I wasn't getting paid for, and very stressful.
And one of the early gallery relationships that you had established very early on was with La Luz de Jesus Gallery, which you've shown with several times throughout your career, especially in those early years. How did you first connect with them?
They were great to me. They were my entire gallery career for the first few years, basically, except for group shows. So I did most of my solo shows through them. Annie was the gallery director and back in the day, and she was also our what's it called? It's like career skills teacher at Otis.
Okay.
And it was just luck. I think they just kind of lucked out by grabbing her for just a couple semesters. They only could get her for that for a couple semesters, but I happened to be in that class. She encouraged us all to apply for this yearly group show they have called Everything But the Kitchen Sink. And I got in and I sold the 2 pieces or 3 pieces I had in that show which then meant that they offered me a 6-person show, and then I sold well in that. So then they offered me a 4 or 2-person show, and it kind of goes like that until you get a solo show. And so it was like a lot of it was just so lucky.
So you'd even started showing with them even during college then?
Yes. Yeah. In fact, I think my first pseudo solo show was my senior show. I kind of combined it because they were both within a month of each other. So I put all the originals in the La Luz, and then I made prints of all of those and put them in my senior show for Otis.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you feel like having that contact so early on helped you kind of get your bearings in the LA art community?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think I would even it wouldn't have occurred to me to even show. I didn't know anything about art. Really. And, a lot of my teachers like Bob Daub and Nathan Oda, that was sort of their thing. They were doing a lot of editorial and book covers and a lot of gallery shows. So I definitely knew that was a thing, but I don't think I would have known how to get my foot in the door. Unless Annie had sort of encouraged us all, how to apply. And she made it really clear, every gallery has their own set of requirements or the way they want you to submit work. Follow it to the absolute letter because they're looking for a reason to discount you. They're just inundated with people submitting. So just don't give them a reason to throw out your application. And, after doing it, you get good practice at it. And then I don't know if I submitted to other galleries, but I always told other kids when I would sit, I had a list of galleries that support emerging artists that I would just send to anyone who wanted it. I always say, always follow their instructions to the T.
Very cool. So, you talked a little bit about the early editorial work that you did, but, I know in general, commercial work has had a somewhat positive presence in your life. So I kind of want to understand a little bit more about, how that evolved from the early editorial work to what you're doing now. What is the nature of the freelance work that you're doing today? Is it still editorial based, or is it something different entirely?
Almost no editorial now. I actually almost never take those kind of jobs because I try to keep the work I do for fun and my personal stuff super, super separate from the stuff I do commercially. And now the stuff I do commercially is it's art direction for TV and movie campaigns. So there's drawing involved, but you would never know it was mine. They're very sort of generic because it's to pitch the idea of a movie poster to a client. And the way I got from the editorial and the gallery stuff to that was after 2 years of being permanently broke and suffering immensely and not having, socks that didn't have holes in it. I had a blog at the time, and I put out a blast kind of saying just out of desperation a bit, just being hey, does anyone know about any work? And I actually was looking for work in animation. I was I need to get a staff position was what I was thinking. I can't keep freelancing like this. And one of the people who hit me up was this guy, Devin Gibbs, who suggested me as, I believe, as a sketch artist to the boss at the Refinery Creative, which is still the main place I work. For the first season of American Horror Story. Did you ever see that show?
Yeah, I watched that. That's good.
So I think he was this girl has a creepy sensibility. And she's looking for work. We should just bring her in and see what she can do. So they brought me in as a sketch artist, but really I was doing more art direction. So coming up with ideas. And I was super rusty. There was nothing on my portfolio that looked anything like what they do. So it was lucky he saw it, the post, and cared enough to even take action and suggest me. And then lucky that my incredible boss, who's still the best boss ever, had the vision to look at my portfolio, which looks nothing like what they do, and think well, maybe I can see a thought process here that could be useful. And then the rest was kind of history with that. So it was desperation and then luck.
That's incredible. So are you working with a lot of the same companies and the same people, or is it constantly a new set of circumstances and personalities to navigate?
No, I mean, literally since that moment, that company that I work for. So there was a period of time where I wasn't working with them all that regularly. They would bring me in for specific projects that kind of were in the kind of ilk of what I like to do. And so then I would freelance with other similar companies doing art direction for TV and movie campaigns, or sketch art. Though, I don't know, sometimes those sketch artists are really fast. Like, I can't keep up. They're so fast. So I did that for a long time. And then there were some different personalities and working for different companies, but everyone's so nice, especially if you're the freelancer, because it's like you're the guest at Thanksgiving and like everyone's so you don't get into the politics of any place. But so after years of sort of doing this at many different places, the refinery offered me sort of an on-retainer position where if I would be exclusive to them for art direction, they would give me as many days a month as I wanted. Basically, we kind of negotiated that. And I don't like to work more than 10, but now I've gotten it down to 3. So I work 3 days a month.
That's nice
for them, which is great. Yeah, and I don't want to work any more than that. And a big part of it too is just that, like, I worked at many different places, and they honestly, everyone treated me great. They were all fascinating and interesting, and each one has their own flavor. But the refinery always was like my heart, and the people who work there and the team is just so supportive and kind and funny, and like the stress level I feel like in general there is low, even though they make amazing work. And I think it's just the best place I've ever worked. And so I was happy and stoked, and they didn't have to convince me much to be like, will you go exclusive? And I was like, yes,
sure.
Absolutely. I love it.
I was waiting for you to ask.
Yeah, I love it there.
So I mean, as far as like the commercial work coupled with your personal work, like I guess, how do you see that fitting into your life? What's the value, I guess, do you see of having commercial work alongside your personal career?
Yeah, a huge value. And I think I always say, like, even if I won the lotto, I would never give up the commercial work through the refinery specifically, because they keep my stress level down, but it's so challenging conceptually, because every project you get, I mean, it could be like some suburban family drama, or, it's something you're not interested in, or it could be about like the world of like professional wrestling, or it could be about historical moments that you haven't really researched, or it could be about American Horror Story, which is exactly what I'm interested in. So it pushes you to explore visual communication in ways that you would never push yourself to do on your own. So it kind of like stops you from becoming inbred in your references and your inspirations. And I also think doing personal work, it's all about you. It's you talking about your mind, talking about your references and your past, and you just need a break from yourself. Those 2 years I was just doing editorial and gallery work, I just felt like I was trapped in my own head, and this weird focus on yourself all the time, I think, is not healthy. We're social animals, and it's great to work as a team on something that like you'll never be connected to, you'll never get credit for. So you're just working anonymously as part of a bigger team on something bigger than you. That it's a great feeling and a great break.
Well, you also highlighted something earlier, which was, some of the struggle that you had early on was the fact that your personal work was the entirety of your income for the most part. Yeah. And that caused you to make decisions that you may or may not be happy with, right?
Exactly.
So this sounds like it gives you the freedom to, I don't have to worry so much about my personal work providing all of my income. I have this other thing that's doing that. It gives me the freedom to do whatever I want. Is that some of what you're seeing?
That's huge. That's huge for it. There are some artists who thrive on having the added pressure of their work also being the way that they fulfill their financial obligations. And I think they just thrive with that pressure. I don't. I curl up. I like crumble. And I love keeping it separate, where the money I make is, there's a slight detachment from that work because it's for a client, and you are specifically trying to reach a goal that isn't just personal satisfaction with it. It also has to fulfill a specific purpose. So, that means that you can separate yourself from it a little bit and not be so tight to it. And getting my money that way is so nice, because then with the personal work, it I can take all the risks that I want. And I think it was pretty clear after I started at the refinery that my personal work just started taking off because it was no longer burdened by having to also be the way I paid my bills.
Sure, yeah. And do you feel that the commercial work that you do in some way influences your personal work, and like vice versa? Do you think there's that synergy between the two?
Hugely. I mean, kind of going back to the benefit of being pushed out of your comfort zone and to find new visual things that you would never have found on your own. You're also hired for the commercial work, kind of often based on your personal work, because you can't even really show your commercial work to anyone. They have to either, through word of mouth, trust that you're good at what you do, or they see your personal work and they, like my awesome boss is like, oh, I think I see the way she thinks is useful. But it's not like I can show previous movie posters I've done because it's all NDC. So the personal work creates a voice, which makes you valuable commercially, where you have a point of view and you have a way of thinking that they can use to create new and interesting solutions to problems for clients. And then the commercial work enriches your personal work by injecting it with these influences you would never have sought out on your own.
Interesting.
So very symbiotic.
That's very cool. And as far as the way that you work with your freelance work, is that similar to the way that you work personally? Like, are you using the traditional mediums, or for your commercial projects, are you using digital and some other types of medium?
Very different. Yeah. So the commercial work is almost all digital. Even the sketches are digital. So just you can make fast changes. And I don't think if you saw the commercial work that you would know it was necessarily mine. I actually try to make it like almost without a style, because you don't want the client to see it and not react and not like it because of the stylization of it. So you make it really kind of generic looking. You just want to get across the composition and the emotion and whatever else to sell it, but you don't want to like put a big amount of your own, voice like into the lines and the look of it.
Sure.
And then for the personal work, it's mostly the traditional medium, but more recently I've been doing these screen prints, and those are all designed digitally, and then I send them off to be printed, which has been like a fun deviation from the norm. Yeah.
Very cool. And you mentioned earlier that you liked the fact that you're working in teams and you can sort of be a part of a bigger initiative. I guess, what is it that you like about being in teams, and do you like collaboration in general?
I actually really don't like collaboration with my personal work. You know, people will come out and be like, "Oh, we should do a collab," and it's like, I don't want to, like, because I just want to do my thing with my personal work. But I love collaboration with the commercial work, and there are also exceptions to that rule. Like, I'm not very confident as a graphic designer. So with personal work, I love to collab with graphic designers and stuff like that. Because I mean, the work that they can do on top of my work or in collaboration with my work is so beautiful, and it makes me so excited to do that. But yeah, I love the collaborative aspect of the commercial work, because it feels like each of us are working at one corner of a huge problem, and then to see it all come together, and, you know, you're driving down a street and you see the billboard finally. And I come in at the project at the very start. So it's like the very first person usually to touch it in the process. So it's the very initial idea. So I'm not there with the nitpicking. I'm not there building the comps in general. And so it's really cool to like be at that ideation stage, and then to see the billboard, you know, that the team has just made this epic, beautiful, polished piece of art. And I just had a tiny, tiny role, you know, or at the beginning. It's rewarding.
That's so cool. But I mean, it would never have gotten to the point where it's at without that initial idea, right?
Right. And even if it's not my initial idea, you know, we all come up with ideas and stuff. It's still so cool to be like, well, that's how they solved that problem. Oh, that was such a smart problem solving thing. And I, because I know the prompt and I know the client direction, like I can really appreciate what they've done. And
that's awesome.
It's fun. Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's shift gears a little bit and talk more about your personal work. So, one of the things you talked about earlier when you were talking about the early work that you did when you were growing up was that there was always animals. There was always animals and never had people. Mm-hmm. And your current work as a career artist also has a lot of animals and a strong focus on the natural world. Do you think that is just the, I guess, continuation of the theme that you started as a kid, and the fact that you had pretty much surrounded by nature all the time?
Yes. Exactly that. Yeah, I think nature, animals, and natural objects and stuff are always the thing that makes me the most excited. And I love spending time outside in nature. I do a lot of camping and hiking and backpacking. I've got a lot of plants and taxidermy, ethical, natural death. Yeah, and so for sure, I mean, I think animals are the focus, and there are also people, but animals are like the thing I love.
Do the animals tend to be depicted, like, I guess, according to reality, or are they symbolic in some way? Like, are you trying to tell the story with the animals that you use in your works?
Yes, they're almost always symbolic, oftentimes they'll have like there'll be violent aspects to it, that maybe they're severed or there's an arrow through something. And in my head, it's never an actual depiction of violence. Like, but yeah, I'm not trying to depict that, but it will be symbolic of something emotional or trauma or something like that. So they're absolutely symbolic.
I guess the symbols that they create, are they related to the people that may be in the picture? They were symbols of things that are happening in your life. Like, I guess, what are they symbolic of usually?
Oh, it probably differs, but I think in general, the animals are symbolic of an internal, they're like it's a way to talk about what's inside. So they tend to be about emotional or intellectual or psychological things happening on the inside, and then the person is also usually symbolic as just as human or woman. Really, I really mostly just draw women, and so it's completely all symbolic. It's not meant to be taken at face value at all, but I'd say it's like the animals in general are about psychological or emotional things happening inside.
Okay, very cool. And when it comes to depicting animals, and people for that matter, do you study anatomy at all? Like, you're obviously not trying to create them exact scientific renderings like maybe your mother was, but is it still important to you to understand the biology side of things?
Yes, I can't get away from it. Like, I love seeing the inner workings of things, and the nature designs things, through evolution so beautifully, and there's a purpose behind every muscle and every turn and every shape. And so I might stylize the animal, or I might, alter it slightly or exaggerate it in a way to create more emotional content or to create more visual interest. But I have a really hard time getting away from the beauty of the way they already exist naturally. And, I don't make up a lot of animals. I don't frequently just create my own fantasy animals, because I think what tends to happen is, even if I go in intending to do that, I'll start researching real animals to get like an idea of what to do. And I'll just be like, it's so perfect already. I kind of just want to do that. So I think my love of the way things already are definitely comes through even in the exaggerated and stylized versions.
Do you use reference photos at all?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You gotta.
and do you take those photos, or are you using usually, internet reference or both, I guess?
Both. So if it's people, then it's almost always me. Just take a photo of myself, and in many photos to get the hands and the face and then I just change the face. So it's a new person. But for animals, I take a lot of photos. So every time I travel, I take a shit ton of photos of animals in zoos and animals I see out in nature, and all that stuff's useful. But, the likelihood of me seeing a tiger out in nature is really low. So you have to use found images. And I think it's really important, especially for the youngins coming up, to know the sort of responsible way to do that. And you can't just copy a photo that isn't yours for many reasons. One, it's unethical. And two, you'll notice looking through a lot of art, you'll be like, these three people all use the same photo. So none of you own that image, you can't publish it legally, you can't do anything with it, so it's kind of a waste of your time. So what I suggest is, if you, let's say you want to draw a tiger, get like 30 photos of tigers, and instead of copying any photo, use them as literal reference to create your own complete, new pose, and then use the photos to know how to build it and how to put it together. And then you'll have your own actual piece of art. And if you see that come up again, no one just saw the same reference photo, like they copied your piece.
No, that's really good advice. Very cool. Another thematic that I noticed, especially early on, and I think it may not be the case as much anymore, but the humans that you depicted definitely had an animalistic side to them. They were very lean, muscular, sinewy, and there's still some of that today. I guess what is that meant to reflect or represent? It almost seems like the people are like one with nature and they're animals themselves.
Yes, they're kind of all like feral. Like, I think I have especially early on, they were even more, I think, kind of sinewy. The idea being that I kind of wanted them to always be feral. And then also I'm using myself as a model. So if there's like a continuation in the way they look, it could be that. Sometimes I hire a model. But I love I think I really like that idea that humans are just a continuation. They're just another animal. And to show them as not actually at all separate from nature. The feeling that we are separate is arbitrary and imagined. We build these crazy houses and these crazy structures, and the concept of money and all this stuff. But the truth is, we're just animals. We're just,
right.
Flesh and blood.
I like that perspective. Another aspect of your work that I really appreciate is just how, I guess, rich in characterization it is. It's almost like you have these rich characters in a world that we're only seeing like a glimpse of. And so that brings with it a sort of narrative aesthetic. Are you intending to, I guess, use your work in a narrative way and tell stories with it?
Yeah, I think I can't help it. Oftentimes the story will be to illustrate something psychological or emotional again. Like if it's symbolic, like the actual thing that's happening might be symbolic, but it tells a deeper story. I think someone in one of my very early shows said, "Oh, I feel like your work is the mythology from a world that doesn't exist." And I love that idea, and I think that's pretty accurate. I have kind of a world in my head that is like an exaggerated version of the way I see the world, and I like to make art from that point of view. I think in general,
that's awesome.
Even if I didn't want to, I think I would. I can't help it.
That's very cool. And as a bit of an aside, I was absolutely delighted to find out that you love Alan Watts. So I adore Alan Watts. Like there's a handful of like his recorded lectures that I'll just go back to and listen to from time to time.
Constant, yeah. Do
you feel that some of his teachings and influences have bled into some of the themes of your work at all?
Massively, because I think. So I had a friend very early on, it was shortly after graduating college, who had shown me Alan Watts, and he'd made kind of a compilation mixtape of all these. It was, I want to say it was like over a day long worth of just recordings of Alan Watts lectures with sort of like soft music in the back. And I just listened to it. I still listen to it all the time, anytime I go on a road trip. And I find that what I love about his point of view is that there's nothing dogmatic. It's purely things you can do to alleviate suffering, or the perception that life is suffering, or to embrace that life is suffering. But the ultimate idea, I think, is that life is ultimately humorous, and light. There's a lightness to it, and his giggle, like Alan Watts, when he actually reads his own writings, his giggle is so charming, and
his voice is amazing. I absolutely love
his voice is amazing. He's such a good speaker. But yes, I love the idea that ultimately that life is a game. There is no intrinsic meaning. So any meaning there is, you give yourself. So you might as well create a game that's worth playing. And you can kind of design it to be whatever you want. And if you want that game to be about getting money and respect and power, then that's what life is to you. But it doesn't have to be that. It could be about personal connection and humor and beautiful moments. And that's, so I think, I mean, it's completely informed every aspect of my life and art.
That's awesome. That's not a bad inspiration to take, I have to say.
He's lovely.
In a few of the interviews that you've done over the years, you said that that words were a big component of your process, and that the meaning of words were sort of integral to the work, and that you use sort of these word exercises or word list exercises to build out the idea. Do you still use that as part of your process? Are words still kind of involved as a starting point?
Yes. Yeah. I still make word lists. I think it's, to me, I have my moleskin right here. It's the fastest, easiest way to get something out of my head, to leave room for new things to come in while still being able to refer back to it. Like, it's not lost. And it's amazing when you start doing this. If you know, like, an artist listening has never done this before. Anytime you have an idea, I'm never away from this. It sleeps next to me in bed and I take it everywhere. You just jot it down in a list, even if it's one word that's just like eggshell blue. You know, if you just have this color stuck in your head, or if you're like badgers, I don't know why, I'm just obsessed with badgers and the way their claws are, you know, and you just write it down and keep an ongoing list. And what happens, the more you do it, the more ideas fall out of your head quickly and new ones come in. And it allows you to more objectively decide what's worth holding on to and what isn't. So you're not so precious. And then when you refer back to it, even like years later, it's almost like an inkblot test, Rorschach, or was this called?
Rorschach
test, where different words will jump out to you depending on how you're feeling or what the project is you're kind of working toward. And you'll create connections that you would never have created in your own head, but seeing them all in a list like this, you'll start to create connections that it just, I don't know. I think it's a really useful exercise for me personally.
How did you first start? I mean, I guess when did you first start picking that up? It seems like you've been doing it for pretty much most of your career, if not all of it. Was that something you picked up in college, or?
That would be high school. So those last 2 years of high school, junior and senior year, I took the International Baccalaureate. It was the first art class I'd ever had, actually. But it was the International Baccalaureate class, and it lasted 2 years. And it was kind of this intensive art class, but it was an art class for non-art people, because International Baccalaureate is kind of like AP, you know, so it was mostly like super smart kids taking an art class. And I only took the art class. But what we had to do was keep this enormous sketchbook that was like, I want to say like 15, it was maybe like 10 inches by 15 inches, big and thick. It's like a book. And we had to fill up both sides of the page. And what happens, you're not allowed to rip any pages out. So if you do a shitty drawing, you have to cover it. And I would cover it oftentimes with lists or words or writings about analyzing my own work or the work of others to try to get to what resonates with me and what doesn't, below the surface, instead of just saying, oh, I love this artist and the way they draw. You could say, like, what I love really is the way that they have built a world that feels like, I don't know, very childlike or something, or very nostalgic. So the list making definitely started with that sketchbook, having to fill both sides of the page, even when there was a bad drawing.
And does the process of building out word lists to help generate ideas for work, does that differ when you're working on a single piece for like maybe a group show versus building out an entire body of work? Like, do you approach those in different ways?
Yeah, I think the word list, I'll probably make word lists for both, but it starts with the word list for the show. So the big body of work gets a full word list. And from there, I just look at that word list to pick out individual words for the individual piece. And quite often with an individual piece, and again, I think this is my science brain, is I almost have to create like a thesis statement, like one either word or one phrase that I literally write down so that I can keep referring back to it as an editing device. So I can add like a decision-making device, because you have to make so many tiny decisions in one piece that you can get kind of overwhelmed. So instead I create this goal, this one sentence or word, and then if I have to make a decision on like blue or green, then I'll be like, well, which one supports this sentence more? Or if I have to say add in arrows or take out this horse? Which one I think would support this more, you know?
It's such like a practical way of going about it.
Yeah. It's very scientific, or kind of just analytical, I guess is more the word. Yeah.
That's fascinating. So after you've gone through this kind of word brainstorming exercise and you've arrived at, some concrete concepts, what's like the next stage for you? Are you sketching like out roughs at that point, or are you just jumping right into painting?
I'm sketching roughs, but I don't usually do thumbnails, or I didn't used to. Now I will, kind of along with the word list, when it's just like a really rough idea I want to remember. But after I have, like, let's say the idea is like death of the ego or something I want to like get a piece about this, and I have this idea of like a woman inside a carved out horse or something, and I have some idea. Well, I'll start pretty rough, and then as I'm sketching, I don't have a perfect idea. I just have the kind of main compositional element usually down. And as I'm sketching, that's when I'll start adding in the layers of information based on that word list. So then I'll be like, oh, I think if there were birds picking at the horse too, that would kind of like be like about how we're eroding ourselves from the inside with our own demons, or, I'll come up with some idea, but I'll add in these other elements that as I go in the sketch phase, probably.
So once you have the sketch pretty much where you want it, is that the point where you transfer it over to whatever the final medium is going to be?
Yes. So once the sketch is good, how I like it, then I scan it. And so I can turn it, because I often sketch in red pencil. So I scan it, turn it black and white, and then print it out at the size that I want to paint. And then I have a bright light table that a really dear friend made me that's like bright. So I can transfer the drawing through thick printmaking paper, like heavyweight paper. Because I hate transfer paper, I just hate the line weight of it, and I just don't like the look. I don't like using it. So I like to use the light box so I can see the surface of the paper and the quality of the lines I'm making. And then so that the paper has structural integrity to paint on, I mount it to a board, to like usually a gesso board these days, but wood or anything like that will work. And that way the paper never curls. It always stays perfectly flat. Every gradient you make is perfect, and you can do a lot more to it. You can throw paint at it, a lot more recklessly because it's got more structure.
I guess, what is it that attracts you to paper so much versus using wood panel directly or using canvas or one of the other, types?
I think it's that light box procedure. I think I'm a drawer first. I love to draw, and I also paint. So I'm so drawn to line, and you can't light box through wood. So I've done it where you project onto it, but it's still hard. You're trying not to block your own projection while you draw. And I just love the quality of line on paper, and finding ways to combine that with paint is a challenge, but
Well, and you do work with several different mediums, from graphite to gouache to even acrylic and oil. Do you have a favorite amongst those? I mean, it sounds like drawing is like what home feels like to you, so maybe it's graphite.
Yes. But drawing is what home feels like, and gouache too, because I will often do little gouache sketches, and those have that looseness and energy that I like in drawing. But I don't have a favorite medium anymore. It used to be all gouache for me, even for the big stuff. But now I've more recently gotten into, screen printing. But, that's nice because I design it, but then someone else makes it. So I don't get caught up in all the tiny errors that I can see, which is really nice. But I also love doing acrylic and then sealing it completely and then doing oil on top. I've been finding that's really fun too. I like it all.
Are there mediums that you'd like to explore that maybe you haven't had an opportunity to yet?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I would have said sculpture, but I have done some of that. Maybe more sculpture would be really fun. I did a bronze in collaboration with a foundry a couple years ago. That was really, really fun. Again, to see, I guess as far as the collaboration thing, I do like collaborating when you get to design it and someone else makes it. Because I don't know, I think having that one little extra separation between you and the final product means you don't immediately hate it after a week. You know, it has a slightly longer shelf life for me before I hate it, because I didn't specifically, you know, like produce it. But no, I think I'm having a lot of fun just going wherever my curiosity takes me.
Awesome. Very cool. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the various books that you've had over the years. You've put out several. There was a 3-volume set, Familiars, Flora and Fauna, Viscera, that came out through Flesk Publications, and that ended up being collected into the J.A.W. Cooper Genesis collection. But then you also had Pastoral, also through Flesk Publications. All of these were done on Kickstarter. So I guess, how did the initial 3-volume project come together? Like, was that something that you initiated, or that the publisher came to you with the idea of? Like, how did that start?
It was, the original contact was the publisher coming to me. So Flesk Publications they were producing Spectrum, which is the yearly release of fantastic art, or like fantasy horror and stuff like that. And I'd had a piece in there, and they didn't know anything about me or as an artist, but they liked the piece. And so John Flesk of Flesk Publications contacted me, and very, very kind of non-concretely, it was just like, sometime in the future would you be interested in doing a book? Like, I don't know what my schedule's like. I don't know if this would even happen within years, but would you be interested at some point, just to like put it on record if you would? And I was like, yes. It's like a dream of mine. It's like, I would love to do a book. And what I love about John Flesk is that he, the reason he was so kind of abstract with it and not concrete is because he only works with people that he contacts, and he only works with people who he first meets them and sees if he can work with them. Because the way he sees it is that, you know, more than making money, he's concerned with like quality of life. And he's only going to want to work with someone where you're both going to really enjoy the process, because it's a long, drawn out process to do a book. And he and I get along so well. Similar sense of humor. I would call him like a dear friend now. And so he's the only person I've published books with. But yeah, that first initial meeting was kind of a test. It was like after that I came and visited the Flesk Publications studio and met them, and just like, can I work with this person? Both in both directions. And we got along so well. It's just kind of history after that. And then after we decided we did want to do a book together and we could work together, then there was the idea for the 3-book set. And then after that, it was like, well, what do we do now? And it's like, I love farm animals, and this isn't like necessarily a super commercial like topic, but he supported me in releasing Pastoral regardless. It's just like, you have to follow your curiosity, and my curiosity takes me to farm animals a lot.
How much involvement did you have in like the production of the books? Were you writing copy and like designing layouts and stuff, or was it more or less providing the art and approving designs?
A bit of both. So the way we kind of work it is, John has an incredible eye for book layout. Like I can give him a huge folder of images, and he will very thoughtfully think of the way he wants the overall flow of the book to go, but also page to page, the conversation the two facing pages have with each other and all this stuff. So usually together we'll kind of decide the overall idea behind the book or the look of the book. I'll do the cover. Sometimes I'll hire a graphic designer to do the type and stuff. Or John will cover it and we'll collaboratively do the type. But I almost always just give him all the images to start with to do the book layout, because he's got such a good eye for it. And then together we'll go through and I'll be like, well, I just don't like the conversation in this particular spread, or let's move these here. So together we will kind of fine tune it, but he's already so good with that flow. And then I'm pretty involved as far as like the idea behind the production. Like, we did the gold book for Pastoral. It was like the special edition, all gold in a gold kind of case. And the idea was to look like a gold brick. And that was really difficult because he didn't have an existing way to do that. So he had to do a shit ton of research to find out the best places to go to get that done, and the many kind of options we would have to do it. So he handles all the practical aspects of that, and together we decide on sort of the big idea that we're kind of moving toward. And yeah, so it's collaborative for the most part, but then within that, we each have some specific roles that we kind of take care of.
It's awesome. It sounds like it's a very rewarding experience. Do you have
Yes.
any plans, I guess, in the future to do another?
Yes, we're doing another. It will. So I took a long break from doing gallery work and kind of traditional work in general, and I'm just getting back into it now because I have a solo show coming up in May of 2021. So next year, mid next year, and there'll be a book that will go with that. But at first, we were thinking the book would kind of go be released with the show, but then the practical aspect of having all the work for the show finished in time to have a book then made for the show is just too stressful. So we'll have the show, and then the work from that show will eventually be kind of compiled into a book.
Very cool. So you mentioned taking a year off, and I wanted to actually talk to you about that because that's such an interesting, I guess, aspect of your recent career. So 2 years off from showing work, and then a full year off of actually making work. What prompted that decision to take a break?
It started kind of small, but I think it was after the pastoral book. The pastoral book, we kickstarted that. And then I also had a solo show within a couple months of that in Spoke Art in New York. And those two big projects kind of happening at the same time burnt me out. And I also had been in the process of realizing that while gallery work was so useful to me, especially in my early career, it's great because it's an external deadline. So you can't, you have to get the work done by a certain time, which is good. You're externally, there's someone who's waiting for the work. You have to get it done. So it forces you to create bodies of work and to be prolific and to be accountable. But I find that gallery shows really vulnerable. And, if I think it hasn't sold well, or if it hasn't done well, if I'm not happy with it, it's really devastating. It's just very personal, and also to get a show done, the gargantuan effort and sacrifice with your time. I would sacrifice my health, relationships, everything goes to the wayside for like a 4-month period to get a show done. And I would just emerge from it like feeling like I had just been hit by a bus, and then of course you've spent all this time. And you have to convince yourself that the show is so important in order to sacrifice all these things. And then the show goes up, and it's a blip. It's always a blip. Of course, it's just a month. Maybe people go, maybe it sells well. Even at best case scenario, after a month, it's done. And then you're like taking stock of what you've lost in that kind of period of time. So for kind of like mental health reasons and to reevaluate how to balance my life in a healthy, sustainable way, I took a big break from the gallery shows, and then also decided to add in taking a break from work in general, because in doing that, realized that my sense of self and self-worth were inextricably tied to the work I do, and that is so unhealthy. I remember thinking, if I had a stroke and I couldn't draw anymore, I wouldn't know who I was or what value I had in the world. And I just thought that I had to stop doing work so I could realize I still have worth, just as a human.
Sure. Yeah. Did you establish a sort of time boundary going in? Like, I'm going to start here, end here, or was it more of an open-ended thing and then you came back whenever you were ready?
It was kind of open-ended. And then there was a point, like I kind of had to go through a series of like guilt at fear to stop doing the work. And then once I stopped doing the work and kind of enjoyed the freedom of just hiking and being a human in the world and experiencing life without trying to justify my place on this planet by drawing, then I experienced a lot of guilt. And I had to work through that. I was like, well, I'm not going to start making work just to alleviate this guilt. I want to like work through it. So it was kind of step by step of pushing back the deadline of when to start doing work again until I felt like I was in a place where I wasn't just running from the feelings I was feeling. And eventually, of course, I was like, oh, I really miss it. I was like, well, that's a good thing. Let's get back to it. And I thought the best way, I think in general, the best way to get back into something like that is to, again, create an external deadline. So, this show coming up has actually been in progress about a year. And that's when I started to get back into the screen printing first. I'm kind of like working into it. And now I'll start the traditional stuff too.
That's awesome. Did you find that it was hard to disconnect that side of yourself for so long, just not having that creative outlet that you were so used to? And we talked about the balance between commercial and personal, how they were sort of synergistic. Removing a part of that, like, was that difficult?
It was surprisingly lovely. Like I think there was a big part of me that felt really guilty for how happy I could be without making art at all. And realizing that, if there was ever a time for any reason that I wasn't able to make art, I could still live a very happy, full life. And I'd never, I felt really guilty about how nice it was to have just a lot of free time. I did a lot of hiking. And as far as the commercial work, I think that actually helps because I was still drawing. Even during that year when I wasn't drawing, I was absolutely still drawing. I either wasn't sharing it online because I wanted separate my ego from the positive response you get from posting stuff, and or it was for commercial work, so I'm still drawing for that frequently, but I just wanted to stop doing anything that was feeding my ego or feelings of self-worth specifically.
Was it hard to get back into the swing of things after taking such a long break?
Totally. Because it takes discipline. And also anyone who's ever taken even like a couple days off from drawing knows that first day back at drawing or something, you suck. And everything sucks and you think, oh shit, I've lost it. Like I shouldn't have taken that time off. But no, you don't lose it because it's actually not here. It's here. And it's just about being patient and getting back into the mindset. And for me, it's important, again, to have that external deadline so that I can't just make excuses. And when it gets hard to draw or the drawings are coming out bad, I can't just be like, well, fuck it, I'm just going to go camping for a week.
Well, and camping is a big part of your life, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. I know early on you were doing it like a month at a time sometimes, and you'd go at least every month. I guess how often are you hiking nowadays?
So let's see. It kind of depends. Just recently, there's been a bit of a break, about a month off or so. But my partner just did the 3 weeks on the JMT, the John Muir Trail. So he hiked from Whitney to Yosemite. And during that time, I watched his dog. So I didn't really hike a lot. Before that, and I like to go camping. I'd love to go every week if I could. Definitely once a month. And hiking as frequently as possible. And backpacking is now in that mix too, slowly. And it's hard because I often go alone. So finding ways to responsibly go out there alone for periods of time has been like fun and interesting. And you just get like one of those satellite phone emergency beacons.
Well, I guess living in LA, highly urbanized environment, and then doing these regular hiking, camping trips, it must give you a very like wide breadth of experiences. Do you enjoy the contrast between those two, and do you need that sort of constant touch point with nature?
Yes, and I think I could be. I think I would be extremely happy to live, in the middle of nowhere on a mountain with a bunch of goats. Like truly full hermit. I don't suffer for lack of human contact, but I do love human contact. So I just don't get lonely. But I love living downtown. I don't just live in LA. I live in like the most, kind of urban, one of the most urban parts of LA. And I really love it. I like being even if I don't leave my house, I like being in my little nest, but being able to look out the window and see the bustle and see the activity. And it feels like life is happening and there's a electricity about that I love. And then I love to escape to nature and just be completely alone for a week. And then come back to the bustle, but be in my little, almost like voyeuristically in my little house, looking out the window at what's happening.
That's very cool. So you mentioned earlier you have a show coming up, so I wanted to talk to you a lot about that. So marking the beginning of your entrance back into your personal work was to start preparing for this show. So what can you tell us about the show?
So the show will be at Gallery Nucleus in Alhambra, and it's a gallery I really like because they I feel like they really focus on commercial artists a lot, and especially in LA, lots of animation artists and professional illustrators, obviously fine artists as well. But it feels like there's a tilt toward commercial artists doing fine art, and I just love the other types of work that they show. And the show theme will be gilt, but GILT, like gilded. Which is why I'm doing a lot of gold foil prints and stuff. But also gilt as in guilt, so it's a bit of like the covering up shame with shiny things and, stuff like that. So there's an emotional, psychological aspect and then practical aspect to it.
And do you have an idea of how many pieces will be in the show? I'm
aiming for 50.
Oh, wow. That's big.
Yeah. So Gallery Nucleus is cool because they have this giant downstairs space. This is kind of like cavernous, big area. And then they have a nice small gallery up top. And at first I was trying to decide which one to go for, but I just thought like, let's go big. But to fill that big space, I need to create a large amount of work. And which is good because I need to create a large amount of work to do another book anyway. So it'll be a mix of new traditional paintings. There'll be the screen prints. Most of them have sold out, so I have kept a couple APs, but I'm going to paint on top of them is the sort of plan. So there'll be like each one's an original and quite painted on. And then, a lot of sketches, but I'm kind of also hoping there'll be time for like sculptural stuff or an installation. We'll see how COVID goes.
Very cool.
But hopefully it'll be big.
Has COVID affected the plans at all? I mean, I guess it being that far out, it may not have, but has that affected your plan, I guess, for the show?
This sounds awful, but only in a positive way thus far, because of COVID, I've had so much time at home to work. And also, a lot of filming was shut down. So there was a little less work coming from the commercial side. And to sort of fill that space, I cut down to 3 days a month. I started doing the screen prints and stuff to just to see if there was another income source there, and it's done so well. I would not have taken that jump probably if it hadn't been for COVID and kind of just getting creative. So the show has been greatly impacted by COVID, but thus far, just that I have a ton of time and I've been more creative about how I use it.
Do you think the screen prints will be something you'd continue to explore and do now that you've experimented with those and that they were successful?
Yes, they're so fun. It's like rekindled my love of art and stuff. And I think it's in no small part because that final step is a production sort of situation where you send the file out, exactly the color, and it comes back how you designed it, or different, or slightly different. Sometimes little happy accidents kind of happen where you didn't expect colors to interact this way. And I think having that one little step that I'm not in control of, or that it's a bit of a surprise, has been really fun for me personally.
Do you do all your own separations and all of that stuff?
Yes. Yeah. I designed the entire file, in layers. So there's just a blue layer that's just printed with this solid blue, and I design it. And it's really fun to play with the effects you can get by just trying on transparencies or various other things. And then the gold foil obviously adds an element where no photo is going to capture that. You have to own the print to know what it's like when it turns and it catches the light at different angles.
Awesome.
So I would really like to, yeah.
Very cool. So anything else you want to put on people's radar? Do you have any prints coming up that you're planning to release?
No, just ongoing. I also started doing some scarves and pin kind of sets and stuff. And it's almost purely for fun, just because I make stuff that I want to own, basically. But I don't know, coming out with new things all the time and having a lot of fun doing it.
Awesome. Very cool. So where can people find you online?
So on Instagram is really the only social media I update, and that's at J.A.W Cooper, JAWCOOPER. And then I also have Facebook, but all of that comes from Instagram. I just automatically share it. And I think I have a Twitter too, but that also, I don't know how to use Twitter. So that's also just automatically from Instagram. And then jawcooper.com. And that's also where the store is. And yeah.
Awesome. Very cool. So last question, and this is something I like to ask everybody. Who is one artist that you'd like to see me have on the show?
Oh my God. I think, and I'm going to say this wrong, but Joao Ruiz.
Oh, J.A.W, yeah. He's amazing.
Yeah, I'd love to hear him on the show. I think, as you know, he had a child kind of recently, and I saw his last show at Think Space, and it was absolutely gorgeous. I'd love just to hear, his philosophy and how he goes about making work, and I just love his work.
He's amazing. Well, Cooper, it was an absolute treat talking to you today. I really appreciate you coming on.
Oh, it was absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
So that's it for this episode of Art Affairs. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Cooper. I found it really fascinating the way Cooper approaches the commercial work that she does, and the value that has in her life and in relation to her personal art career. It was a very similar take as what Christina Mrozik said about the commercial work she does. The way that by not relying on your personal work entirely to pay the bills, then it allows you the freedom to take chances and push boundaries with your personal work. Or I guess more correctly, to not feel pressured to keep your work within a certain set of boundaries just because it's more, financially viable. By taking on commercial work so that the burden of financial responsibility can be, removed or reduced from your personal work, you're able to make work that might be truer or more authentic. But Cooper brought up an additional benefit that we really didn't talk as much about in my conversation with Chris. The way that her commercial projects benefit her personal work and vice versa, forming this sort of synergistic bond, being exposed to different external interests that she may not have otherwise encountered can help to bring new and fresh ideas to her personal work. And then the voice and style that she develops as part of her personal art demonstrates a particular aesthetic that commercial clients can use and potentially open up new opportunities for her. So yeah, I really liked her take on that. And then, of course, I absolutely love how much she loves Alan Watts and how she's really lived her life by some of the ideas that he taught, as far as life being essentially playful, like a song or a dance, and that it's up to you to really play your song the way that's right for you. I highly encourage any of you out there listening, if you haven't heard any of Alan Watts' lectures, do seek them out. You can find hundreds of audio recordings from them on YouTube. So definitely check his stuff out. It's amazing. It was also exciting to hear more about Cooper's upcoming solo show. I love the theme for it and the wordplay in that. Upwards of 50 new pieces. It's going to be a huge show. It's so great to have, her back and freshly excited about making new work. So that show, titled Guilt, will open mid-May of 2021 at Gallery Nucleus. Stay connected with Cooper's and the gallery's Instagram for more details as they come out. So thanks again to Cooper for joining me today, and thank you for checking out the show. I'm truly grateful for your support. If you happen to have Apple Podcasts, rating and reviewing the show there is such a great way to help out. And as always, you can contact me through my website at artaffairespodcast.com or on Instagram at artaffairespodcast. So until next time, be good to yourself and be good to each other.